Too many who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing spider talk, the amazing spider talk. Come swing through the air, sit back and prepare for the amazing spider talk.
Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavosdin, and I'm the founder and editor of AmazingSpiderTalk.com.
Hey, and I'm mischievous Mark Chinacchio, the founder of the Chasing Amazing blog and author of 100 Things Spider-Man Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for a special episode of the all-new Amazing Spider Talk. We hope you enjoy this podcast and that it provides an intelligent conversation between two fans and collectors as we look at the Spider-Man comic universe in a bit of a bigger picture.
Dan, today we're going to be discussing our thoughts on Amazing Spider-Man number 797 to 799, the first half of the final arc of Dan Slott's run, also known as Go Down Swinging. All the discussions you're about to hear were recorded as part of our Patreon club the week that these comics were released, or thereabouts.
Yeah, as best as we can make happen.
Exactly. But if you would like to join us for these episodes as we release them in real time, especially now, Dan, it's a great jumping on point because we're about to get a new creative team on Amazing Spider-Man. Why not head over to our Patreon page and join us for just $3.99 a month, the cost of one new comic. For now.
Yeah, we do a ton of awesome stuff over there, Mark. And in fact, we just recorded an episode all about the Amazing Spider-Man Free Comic Book Day issue. You know, the one that kicks off the Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley run that we'll be getting this summer? I mean, you should remember it, Mark, because you were there for that conversation.
I was there. And do Free Comic Book Day issues count, Dan?
Yes, I think they do.
Oh, no. I don't have them all.
Well, you know, either way, tune in, everybody. It's free on Comixology, so you can read it even if you didn't make it out to Free Comic Book Day. And you can find out what we thought of the last page twist. And then also tune in a week or so for our discussion about Avengers Infinity War.
I don't feel so good, Dad.
So again, you know, this show wouldn't happen without our awesome Patreon subscribers. You know, so we wanted to start naming our new subscribers for this month. So, Mark, let's butcher some of these names.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah, you have a track record for this. So I want to thank Half Skimo, Jessica Fleckenstein.
Can I take the next one, Dan?
Yes, you can.
It's Crystal D.
You nailed it. And what about the rest of them, Mark?
Adam Chapman. I know that one. Cole Grandel, who actually upgraded his account. And I think that's it for now, right, Dan?
Yeah, so thanks to everybody who joined our club and made this possible. So let's get right into the action on this podcast and go to our first review of Go Down Swingin' in Amazing Spider-Man number 797.
What's new? Is Spider-Man still wearing red or is it blue? Maybe he took a week off cause he had the flu. But probably not cause his been losing tried and true. Let's find out in the Spider-Man review. Okay, so we're gonna make Dan feel better by talking about the newest issue of Amazing Spider-Man number 797 by Dan Slott and Stuart Immonen. It is the first chapter of the Going Down Swinging, the last Dan Slott story on comics and on Spider-Man. He's going to Iron Man, so he's not disappearing from comics.
Mark, do you know something I don't know?
I don't. I swear. I don't even know if it was a Freudian slip. I don't wish Dan Slott left comics. I generally enjoy most of his stuff. Yeah, so the last few issues, Dan, of Amazing Spider-Man have been kind of mediocre, I would say, maybe even less so.
kind of felt like a meandering build to this big story that's been getting hyped up now for a few months, since we learned that Dan Slott was going to be not leaving comics but leaving Spider-Man. And I felt like the lot was riding on this issue because of this kind of subpar buildup, and here we are, and this comic for me delivered in almost every way possible.
And I feel the same way. This is a pretty stellar issue, one of Dan Slott's best.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it was perfect, because I felt really a lot of any issues I had with this comic were kind of tied into some of the clumsy setup things that had been laid out earlier, like the Peter Mary Jane stuff in this issue. I thought was kind of lacking and just felt tacked on with a rivet gun. But the heart of the story is obviously we're charting Norman Osborn's transformation into the Carnage Red Goblin, and also kind of getting a sense of what his plot for Spider-Man is. And there's just so many. I feel like the total drama and the layers of reveals are done so intelligently and so creatively in this comic. I mean, from the onset, we have Norman kind of talking to somebody at the start in a very threatening way, and given what we've kind of experienced with Norman and Carnage and this bonding over the last few issues, my initial thought was, oh, Norman's just talking to himself, right? You know what I mean? Or talking to the Carnage symbiote. You didn't that was kind of, to me, the first swerve of many in this comic that I thought were brilliantly done.
That's interesting you say that. I did not have that interpretation, but I could see where that would have come in. I always thought there was someone there, and I thought, okay, who is this going to be that's going to make this story super interesting? I thought it was going to be the Gwen Stacy clone, if you had asked me who it was, But, Carnage is really certainly interesting, too. Of course, we hear that person talking back, and we slowly get these clues as to who it would be. And to me, rereading it, I immediately go, oh, well, duh. The first clue is right there, is the location of where this is happening, in the Gentleman's Club.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, we're going all the way in the Wayback Machine to, what is this, Amazing Spider-Man 26 or something like that? I mean, this is the Wayback Machine here, right?
Yeah, I guess Norman Osborn's first appearance, really,
Yeah.
Maybe not as far back as 26.
No, I think that was, because Osborn didn't appear by name until I think issue 37 or something like that. But there's during that Crime Master arc, I think there is a reference to the Gentleman's Club that Jameson is, and there's a guy in a purple hat that's clearly Norman Osborn in one of those scenes. So. No,
you're right. You're absolutely right. And what an interesting place. I was immediately thinking, I wonder where this is, and he tells you pretty up front. And how about, I don't think there's a way to talk about this comic without first just getting into the artwork in this comic. It is incredible. Immonen is the best in the industry, and this is, you have a character basically talking to himself. The way he draws Norman's movements and posings, it's so terrifying. I can't remember being scared by a character in a comic like this, maybe ever. This is really frightening stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally sinister, and it's funny. As I'm reading it, I think I even wrote this in the review. As much as I loved the artwork that Mike Perkins did on that Carnage series that he did with Jerry Conway a couple of years ago, I really felt like that was really good Gothic visual storytelling. I mean, this just takes that and ups the ante even further. I mean, because you're not even dealing with the raw force of nature that is Carnage in this issue, at least not really to this point. It's just Norman, in shadow with, the coloring by Marte Gracia, who did the coloring. I mean, the coloring is just fantastic. I mean, this is like some of the best coloring we've seen in this book probably since Edgar Delgado and Ramos were together about 100 issues earlier. But like, it adds to the whole level of terror and just, again, these reveals that are slowly being peeled back, which, like, as you kind of point out, they are dropping clues pretty early on that lead to the conclusion that we get to. But we're kind of dealing with jumping forward and backwards in time throughout this issue, not always, to me, completely clearly. I do kind of want to ding the issue for that. Like, I mean, we kind of established the timeline early where it's, we see Norman and then we jump 4 hours earlier to Peter and MJ, and then as Peter leaves the apartment, you kind of see Norman lurking around, and to me that's when I was keyed into the fact, like, oh crap, like there really is a legitimate hostage here. He's not just talking to himself in different character voices or anything like that, which was kind of my initial read of the situation. And then we kind of keep jumping back and forth between Peter interacting with different characters and Norman and back in the Gentleman's Club, and just slowly peeling back. Could it be this person? Could it be that person? And I'm wondering, in one breath, have we seen this person? Has this person already been in this issue in some facet? Or is it someone completely different? I was actually, you said the Gwen Stacy clone. I was thinking Harry.
All of these characters came to my mind, but like, to me it seemed like if they're going to do a double reveal, you reveal someone that you don't even expect to be in the book, period.
I was thinking because we really have not seen Harry for quite some time, although we did see Liz Allen and Normie and Liz kind of. Did we see Harry in this issue?
Yeah, he shows up in this issue.
Oh, that's right. Because
he's at the park with them.
You're right. Okay, my bad. I'm sorry. Still, I guess for some reason I thought that Harry was going to be, but you saying that was someone that was completely out of the book would have made sense too. Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's great Gothic visual storytelling. Norman's facial expressions are just spot on, and I don't know, like, I mean, like, this is one of the most terrifying single issues of Spider-Man I've ever read.
Yeah, the threat is like immediately apparent. What did you think about Imminent's art really portrays like a new kind of Norman. Like, I mean, a lot of that is just because he's such an incredible artist in terms of creating compelling character performances. Whether it's through how the character's standing or the kind of shot choice that he's using. Pardon my kind of film language here. But the way that this character moves, it kind of reminds me of like Heath Ledger's Joker in a way. It's this kind of like somewhat silly, nonchalant about the violence that he's inflicting. It's not really something that I'm really used to seeing from Norman, and I wonder if this is the kind of jokey, violent nature of Carnage beginning to influence him in some way, or if it's just that he has reverted back to... We haven't seen him take the Goblin Serum yet, but, I guess you could imply maybe he took it off panel. He has... returned the Goblin to presence in his mind.
Yeah, although, I mean, I would say that even, like, when Norman was, like, peak Goblin, like, he never was truly a Jokerish character. I mean, the Joker wasn't even truly the Joker, I don't think, when Norman was first kind of doing his thing in the 60s and 70s, and then by the time they brought Norman back in the 90s, I always felt they kind of were modeling him more after like Lex Luthor in terms of kind of being a master of the universe in the comics. So yeah, I mean, but like there's definitely like I think a visual nod to that, and then even like a characterization nod of and I've always kind of felt like Carnage, with that being said, was kind of a Jokerish character. When he was introduced as kind of this like, emotionless force of nature that, like his origins just didn't matter, like, I mean, like I always felt like the worst Carnage stories were the ones that tried to like make you understand the character It's like, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't need to understand the character. He just is, you know, kind of like how the Joker is.
Cletus Cassidy even kind of looks like the Joker.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, like, I never really needed to know about him being in an orphanage or anything like that. I just, you know, just the character is what he is. He's this psychotic sort of force of nature. So, like, I think merging Osborn's kind of well-to-do-ness with that more looseness, Immonen just kind of marries him perfectly into what this is. So it's, like I said, it's kind of like the Joker, but not totally. It's still Norman at its core.
I loved it. I'm super intrigued by who this guy is and what kind of damage he's going to inflict on Spider-Man's world. You know, I was saying to my wife, you know, describing how much I like this book, which I try to spare her from as much as possible, but, you know, it can't help but seep out, that, like, I was kind of, like, rooting for the villain in this book and how weird that is to be doing in this book. You know, like, you want the characters to be okay. That's why you read. But I was so rooting for this threat to be continually ramped up because how fun it is to see characters have to deal with that. And this specific threat of Norman Osborn, like, we so want him to be returned to his former glory as a villain. And I think this book does it. You know, like, in one issue, Norman is back to being the threat that maybe even more so than he was before, and how joyful that is in a weird, twisted way.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because whereas I do agree that it's wonderful to see this character kind of be used in a way that where the threat is truly palatable. But, like, I you know, when we get the ultimate final reveal in this comic, which we'll obviously get to in a little bit, it did make me wonder if Dan Slott kind of painted himself into a corner a bit with the character, because it's like, you know, now that, you know, it's you know, Norman has Spider-Man's identity, so it's like, you know, everything is back to the way it used to be pre One More Day, but now with this added threat of Norman being completely bonkers with the Carnage symbiote, which makes it even more stressful, you know, more agonizing. It's kind of like, you know, after this story, it's kind of like, where do you even go with these characters? Like that's what I mean by paint into a corner. It's like, you know, like, I kind of feel like one of them has to die again. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you can't put that all back. Like, so much is out now. You can't put that back in the box after this. So I'll be curious to see how that's remedied in a way that is good for long-term stories.
Would you mind him dying? I mean, honestly, like, the best, Goblin story is the one where he dies. You know what I mean? Like, to me, like, I don't mind. I'd rather him have an amazing story where he's a real threat and die than just be this kind of, like, character lingering in the background. Like, it's how I feel about the Hobgoblin right now. It's like, he was really great character, and now he's, like, popping up in Ultimate Spider-Man or Spider-Man, whatever you want to call it, and, like, all these other books, and the character's only gotten watered down, you know? Like, I'm okay with Norman just dying.
Oh, yeah, I mean, especially if you feel that's what serves the story best. I mean, especially if it's done in a very meaningful way. But I guess my issue with it is, I mean, it was certainly done in a meaningful way where the character had to die back in the 70s, and Marvel still brought him back. So it's kind of like, you know, if they kill him off again, are they, you know, he's not gonna stay dead. You know, he'll be dead until they feel they need Norman Osborn back in the book again, whether that's a couple years from now, 10 years from now, or whatever. So you kind of just want to, like, I don't know, like, that's what I just mean by like, you know, it's kind of like, can you kill Aunt May again after Amazing Spider-Man number 400? You know what I mean? Like, you did it in the most well done, meaningful way possible, and now you undid it. So, like, anything you really can do to raise the stakes of that character ever again you kind of just paint yourself in the corner. So I do wonder if that's what you got going on here with Norman is, have they painted themselves into the corner by just like ratcheting it up too far? But at the same token, to me, it's important that Norman has that information about Spider-Man, because that's always what set him apart from everybody else. And it kind of, when you're in this universe now where it seems like that cat is out of the bag again, you know what I mean? Like, how is Norman not privy to that now? Like that seems inherently unfair too. So I'm looking forward to this story either way, but I'm going to be, we've had good first chapters from Dan Slott in the past for some of these big stories. So that's the first thing that kind of gives me pause before getting too swept up in what we had in this issue. But I think the added high wire act here that we need to see is how is this resolved in a way that is meaningful for the long term of the Spider-Man universe, because this is set up in a really big way now. This landing needs to be stuck, I think. I
agree, and I'm trying to be hopeful about it, and I think any of those concerns you have about doing this stuff over and over again, there is a limited return on investments if you do the same stuff over and over again. But at the same time, I also think a good writer can make anything work. Superior Spider-Man, a bad writer doing that would have made that the most hackneyed, boring thing we ever read, and it could have been done in an issue. But a good writer made it really exciting for a long time, So we'll see. But, I think it certainly poses a lot of really interesting questions that are the kind of interesting questions that I like to read in the pages of this book. So I'm 100% on board with this, where, with what happened in this issue. I don't want to hang so much on this opening of the story. Let's come back and talk about the ultimate reveal at the end of the book. But I did want to make one special note, to this kind of interrogation of Jameson thing. I guess we haven't really said it was Jameson, but it was Jameson in the chair.
Spoiler.
Yes, is the mouse sequence I thought was so artfully done, where he says you're going to squeal like the mouse, and you get that slight reveal of the Carnage symbiote in silhouette, which we get, I guess, kind of later in the episode, or not episode, in the issue as well. The kind of Carnage via silhouette, to me, super creepy, like the creepiest.
Yeah, I was just saying both appearances by Carnage in this book. Again, not to dwell on how great Imminent is, but they were just masterfully pulled off, and how they were terrifying and creepy, but didn't actually resort to graphic violence or anything, or just gory violence, I guess, or bloody violence. Maybe that's what I'm talking about, because both scenes were pretty graphic, I guess, in terms of their intent and what the end result. The other one being the I guess I am going to go out on a limb and say our good friend Phil Urich is a dead guy now.
I don't think it's much of a limb. I would say go out on a heart, because it seems as though his heart was torn out of his body.
Yeah, the Goblin King or Knight or whatever the hell he's calling, who was depowered by Silk, right? We think, and at some point along the way.
At the very least, he was kidnapped during the Axis story. Not kidnapped, he was arrested during the Axis story. But yeah, I thought he was depowered by Silk at the end of her story. I don't know. Some inconsistencies with this character.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've never been a huge fan of what Dan Slott has done with Phil Urich between his Hobgoblin arc and all that. And, this is kind of, I think, an interesting case of a creator putting the toys back in the box, so to speak. Because this character wasn't really being used at all since the 90s. And Dan Slott kind of brought it back to mixed results, I would think. So I think this is kind of obviously tying up that loose end in his mind by just killing him off. And, obviously if somebody feels inclined to bring him back in a couple of years, they'll find a way. It won't be that hard, I guess. There's always a way.
I just loved how much this was a reversal of Phil's kind of reappearance in this book during the big time story. Yeah. You know, you've got Phil, who as an unarmed, seemingly unarmed character takes down a goblin. You got the same thing going on here where Norman seems to be unarmed and takes down the hobgoblin, or I guess goblin knight or king or whatever. I thought that was like a fitting way for Phil to go out, seeing as he kind of tried to pull that trick on someone else.
Yeah, and you got kind of a nice bittersweet moment with his Uncle Ben prior to that. I mean, that's always kind of been the hook for the character is, Ben Urich and the, kind of how he and Peter both have their Uncle Bens, but one is living and the other is not, and thus they kind of go on these divergent paths because of that. But, again, kind of playing with that theme, you have this scene where, leading up to Phil's ultimate demise, Ben is kind of, not bemoaning, but is talking wistfully about his nephew and, if he gets arrested or whatever, at least it offers, it's kind of like it offers me an opportunity to try and bring him back, kind of his attitude, like through his nephew hitting the ultimate rock bottom, not thinking that rock bottom could mean death. That maybe he can get through to him again, and obviously that will not come to pass. So that there is some pathos in that, which is I think well done by the creators here.
So I want to go back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, which is the MJ scene. We talked a lot about last episode on this about how this might be ultimately paid off, and could they make it seem worthwhile or more natural, and in my mind they didn't even do any of that. Like, this still felt like kind of trolly, and you get a slight admission. MJ says, I do love you, but I can't take the anguish of Spider-Man. But to me, like, this just makes MJ even more unlikable, especially how she's being written. What a painful thing to do to fans that like this character, and this relationship. Yeah,
I mean, and I mean, frankly, the way she kind of has Peter exit, I thought was really despicable too. Like, let's leave as Spider-Man because it'll be easier to explain than my ex. I mean, it's I don't know who or what they're trying to service in doing this. I mean, for a moment I was like, are they, when they were kind of hinting that maybe MJ was the one in Norman's chair, tied up, that maybe she would, like, okay, maybe that's why they went in this direction, because now she's in danger and yada yada. But it wasn't that either. It was just, like I said, I don't know if it's trolling or what. I just don't understand it. Like I said, I don't know what any of this served. Like, who is happy about this and who is unhappy about this? Because it's just like, it's there's so many other, like, comic pages in a comic book they're shrinking by the day, and this is how we chose to use a good number of pages over the last two issues, and I just, it's got to be something better than that. That's on the cutting room floor that I would rather have seen in these comics. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that, he wants to bring her into this because it increases the threat level of this story. Like, I think back to, I guess, the last really big Norman story in, like, Revelations, where everybody's at that Bugle office party and they're about to die. And I get the feeling that we might be headed in that direction with this book, where the entire supporting cast is, explicitly under threat by this Red Goblin character, and including Mary Jane in that lineup makes it all the more dangerous. But I don't see why you had to play with this whole relationship love angle. It seems to kind of, like, play with people's hearts a little too much more than just, it's inflicting pain instead of just raising stakes. There was a painless way to do this.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we're not marriage truthers. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So the fact that we're even being like, wow, that was kind of cold of Slott and Marvel to do this. It's kind of like, all right, like, don't say it's the fans who aren't over it. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like, in one breath, they're telling people to get over it and move on and find something new to complain about. And then they do this, which just seems to be stoking those fires. So, I mean, do you want people to be stuck on this, or do you want them to move on? I don't know. Seems that they want them to still be fired up about it. They know it's a third rail, and they like to hit it every once in a while. So, whatever.
Whatever is right. So speaking of classic elements of Spider-Man stories, we got this burglar scene in this story. I thought this was really fun, but I have no idea what larger purpose it's serving.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of to break up the tension of the issue. Otherwise, I mean, this other stuff is so ominous, is so dire, is so dark. You kind of would get almost too lost in it. So I just kind of saw this as breaking the mood. It's kind of like a cut scene, yeah, in a video game almost. Just to kind of keep it moving a little bit. But it was fun. It was well done. It was as funny as a Spider-Man catching a petty thug scene has been. Kind of felt out of the movie. Kind of felt like something I would have seen in Homecoming. Yeah. In terms of the banter, so I enjoyed it.
One of the things I noticed about the scene that I really liked that Imminent has done, but I think this provided a real opportunity to showcase it, is how much he thinks about the mechanics of the webs and the physics of them. The way that he, shoots the web at this guy's like right hand and then flips him over this lamppost. There's a lot of thought to how the momentum of that would actually work. And it's not something you see a lot of Spider-Man artists really concerning themselves with. But if there's any more praise we can heap on Immonen, it would also be this. Like, this guy really, thinks about, okay, so Spider-Man's a real guy. Like, how does this work? And this scene, I thought it was really well, structured in terms of the mechanics of everything.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's very astute of you to kind of pick up on that. I mean, I guess nothing gets by Imminent either,
Yeah, don't give me the credit. That guy, he makes it obvious. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like he really spends the time putting it together. So the next scene we should talk about, which we kind of also complained. I think I complained about it more than you did last episode. Is this kind of the status quo of Liz Allen? Like, what's up with this character? We come back to her, and we get a guest appearance by none other than Mark Raxton,
right?
Who we haven't seen in 200 issues.
I'm gonna say probably since like the how did Harry die issues, right?
Yeah, I think that was the last time we saw him.
All right. I mean, don't let old school characters ever go by Dan Slott, right? You know what I mean? Like, he's always going to bring the two of them together. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of lost in the wilderness on Liz. I don't know if this really answered any questions for me on that front. I mean, do you feel more satisfied by the direction here?
I do, actually. I like the bit where she acknowledges that this is an unusual role for her and is asking Mark to let her kind of revel in bossing all of these people around. It seems right for the character who, for a while there during the end of the Spectacular run was kind of just a character that was repeatedly beat up on. You know what I mean? Whether it be physically or otherwise, she just was crying every issue, was just having her heart torn out. So to see her in a position of power and know that she's enjoying it, did a lot to sell me on what might motivate her, in a way. Although I still am not very clear on what her, role and association with Norman is. Because during that whole Goblin Nation arc, wasn't she, knowingly working for the Goblin in order to provide protection for Normie in some way.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, he's the most important thing to me, so, I'll dance with the devil to keep him safe and to keep him provided for. And I guess that's ultimately why I'm still kind of muddied with the character, because it just seems like there has been no consistent through line with this character in years now. We just kind of keep jumping from subplot to subplot, and it's good to kind of acknowledge the status quo with her the way they did in this issue. And it was kind of funny to have her be like, what, I'm bossing around my old high school boyfriend, what's better than that? You know what I mean? Like, and there's obviously truth to it, but I just don't know. I don't know what her deal is. I mean, are we rooting for her? Are we against her? I don't know, and I don't know if the writer knows either with Liz Allen.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I hope it gets addressed in this story. I hope that she, it'll be interesting now that she and Harry are a couple, which I read all of Secret Empire. I don't remember, that relationship being cultivated. Maybe I missed it somewhere, and if I did, let me know. I know in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 4, was it number 7? He, saves his family from Regent with that car. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
And that kind of sparked them having dinners again
right.
together as a family. I didn't get the idea that they were becoming a couple again, but I buy it. I just wonder if I missed something. But I'm curious to see if that kind of dynamic will come into play where she has to kind of choose sides between her, allegiance to Norman, as we suspect, and her kind of newfound love for her ex-husband, I'd be curious to see if that plays a role in this comic as we move forward. A lot of things to juggle.
Yeah. So let's obviously talk about the big reveal and who is at the center of it. I mean, the hostage, as you spoiled it out earlier, Dan, is J. Jonah Jameson. We seem to finally be paying off that issue of Spectacular Spider-Man where Peter reveals his secret identity to Jonah. But it's funny. Someone had tweeted at me, and I don't disagree with this. I mean, as really fantastic as that reveal was, it definitely got me. Like, I didn't see that coming, and yet once it was revealed, it all made sense to me. And I also liked how Jonah let it all slip, like his line about, you even killed his girlfriend, and that was what triggered it for Norman. I mean, it was really well done. But this whole Peter outing himself to Jonah thing in Spectacular, I mean, this has really not been I mean, we had a scene in the last issue of Amazing Spider-Man where Jonah's like giving Spidey pointers and like a pep talk on being a hero, but this has not really been integrated well into the story. So as interesting as the payoff is, it's good for us because we've been reading everything and kind of looking to see when this was going to get paid off. But if you're kind of a more casual reader or someone who just reads Amazing or whatever, this is out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, even last issue, they didn't even use their typical editor's note to say, go read the issue where Jonah finds out Spider-Man's identity, which you think would be like the one time you definitely need to be sure to put an editor's note in the comic. Right?
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, you're a Spider-Man fan. You might be inclined to read everything that Spider-Man shows up in, but it's not like the books are structured in a way where they're all playing off each other like they did like in the 90s during the Clone Saga, where it was like a weekly saga in each book. I mean, these books are, as far as I'm concerned, they're separate universes right now, like it's a missed opportunity. And and this was kind of my issue with that storyline in Spectacular in the first place. This seemed like such a momentous moment to kind of pull the trigger on something like that in 6 issues in of a secondary series that at that point was kind of languishing in terms of its quality. Really seemed bizarre for me and kind of desperate by Marvel. And, I know Dan Slott had said from the get-go that, it was, it's canon and he's going to use it. And maybe he even had this in mind for how he was going to use it when this all happened. But I don't know. Like I said, these are the dings against this issue of Amazing Spider-Man that I was talking about. It's stuff that was clumsy in its execution, either in other books or earlier in this book. It trickles into this and affects it. Like this, as good as this moment was, how much better would it have been if it was actually built up properly in the context of this book?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and everything you said. But now that we're here, right? Like, and this is where we're at. I actually think this is a great beat for that relationship with Jonah, because it's something Jonah would totally do, which is say something he shouldn't have said, because he is this braggadocious kind of, guy who more often thinks, but speaks before he thinks. He would play up the dramatics of this and reveal that. And now all of a sudden there is a new tension between Spider-Man and Jonah. They couldn't just go to be perfect partners. Jonah screwed it up, and now all the stuff that falls out from this is on Jonah and his big mouth. You know what I mean? I mean, not all of it. I mean, really, it's Jonah. And in that situation, anybody would make that mistake. But to me, it was like, oh, good. Like, this won't be a repercussions-free incident because, that Jonah learns his identity, because now it actually has some consequences. And so I was very pleased with that. It's still very odd to me that Jonah knows who Spider-Man is, and this isn't like the biggest revelation in the pages of this book.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying wholeheartedly. I mean, like I said, okay, if you want to take out the noise of where this came from and just look at this moment in isolation, it's a brilliant moment, and I totally buy into this moment because of, like you said, I mean, it's a total, Jameson is, his defense mechanisms are kicking in, so he's going on the attack as a way to deflect from Osborn and like insulting the Goblin, and of course, like he, now with this new information, he's going to let it slip. It's a great moment, but like I said, it's unfortunate to me, and and the fact that somebody kind of pointed this out to me almost immediately after I posted this review, indicates that there are people out there who either, like I said, they're not reading Spectacular, or they're just kind of nonplussed by it, and they're kind of like, okay, so this thing that I guess is canon is really, the effects are that long reaching because of how it's deployed here. It's just something to keep in mind. Like I said, it's something to, when we get to our ultimate grades here, which I'm assuming are coming up soon, it's just kind of will add into, as much as I like this issue, why I had a few dings on it. That's all.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And I like back to the Jonah moment too, like when he says, you killed his girlfriend, that implies a whole other story of Jonah, post realizing Peter is Spider-Man, having all these secondary revelations, realizing that, oh, that means that was his girlfriend who died. And that means yada, 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 right? Like he has this veil pulled off, and suddenly his whole world is recontextualized. But we never got that moment. It was just, oh my God, he knows, and then now he's his partner, or like friendly with him on the phone. There was no development to this point where that line from Jonah could have been really an emotional moment, because here's this guy that's made this revelation and he's being sincere, but his sincerity trips him up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, not getting that moment to me is a big missed opportunity. I mean, not to play Monday morning quarterback here, but as much as we kind of felt with the annual issue with Betty Brant and Ned Leeds was harmless fun, I mean, that would have, to me, that would have been a great opportunity to do a standalone Jonah issue, like dealing with the fallout of this revelation. And it also would have dovetailed nicely into this storyline. But, que sera, it didn't happen. And it probably, unless they're going to, Dan Slott's going to take one of his last 4 issues to do that story, which I doubt, it's just never going to be. And, like I said, that's a good opportunity to tell story. I mean, we just did on our main show an episode about the supporting cast and how, in changing up the cast kind of offered all these new opportunities to tell different kinds of stories. And here's a perfect example of a story you could tell with a supporting cast member, and they didn't do it. So this is where we are.
I've been so pleased with how much our main episodes have just synced up with the issues we've been reading. Last week it was, the MJ Gwen episode, and then we got an issue where Mary Jane comes back into the book. Then we do an episode about the supporting cast, and now it's a whole issue about the supporting cast.
Yeah.
Some interesting kismet going on there.
Absolutely.
Not the most interesting syncing up of our podcast and this book, that being the Red Goblin.
Red Goblin.
But another interesting observation nonetheless.
Absolutely. All right. Well, do you want to get to grades?
Let's do it. Mark, what's your grade?
I'm giving this an A-.
I was going to give it an A, but I think you've convinced me. A-, and that means there's room for us to grow.
Yeah. I mean, that's and I know I said earlier, we've seen these big opening chapters from Dan Slott before, but I do feel there's something different about this. I kind of like, this is set up really well. I mean, okay, there's obviously still a margin for error, but at the same token, we got 798, 799, and 800, and I'm assuming 801 is going to be some kind of like epilogue, or I guess prologue. Excuse me. No, what's the term I'm looking for, Dan?
Epilogue.
Epilogue. Okay, thank you. Some kind of epilogue, but I feel like this is set up enough to be tight enough to go quickly. To me, this was the best reveal that Dan Slott has done since 698, right? With I
so.
Am Peter Parker, and that, to me, those 3 issues were all great issues. Even with some of my problems with 700, it's still a great issue.
I feel that way about this one. I think this is a landmark issue with a couple of dings in it.
Yeah. So, people kind of saying, oh, well, we saw this with Goblination, we saw this with Spider-Verse, we saw this with Dead No More. I mean, I get the hesitance, and, I'm not ready to completely throw myself into the wind here and just be, ready to just love every second of this story. But at the same token, this was really well set up, and like outside of a couple of little things, I see this going in a direction that should be positive. It's like, because it's I'm not predicting necessarily what's going to happen, but like, I don't know. I feel like the circumstances are pretty tight here. Like there's only so many directions you could truly go, and they're all good directions for the most part.
It's not some larger than life threat. It's not like clones or multiverse or giant spiders. It seems so far to be a pretty simple tale.
Yeah.
But with carnage. I'm rooting for this story. Like we said last time, I want Dan Slott to go out on one of his best tales yet, and I think if he can pull it off so far, he's setting it up to be a real possibility.
Definitely. All right, that was fun, Dan. I mean, woo! I always love having a good issue like this, and why don't we just keep that love flowing and going with our next review of Amazing Spider-Man number 798. Hit it, Patreon recording. Yeah, hey, welcome. We're going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man number 798 here, part 2 of Going Down Swinging. We really liked the last issue a lot, Dan. I think it was probably one of our better reviewed Spider-Man comics since we've been doing this show for almost. We haven't hit episode 200 yet, have we?
No, we're like 10 away.
Okay, we're getting there. Yeah, Dan. I mean, Dan Slott, Stuart Immonen, and company, they're really bringing the goods these last few outings here, and this one was no different. We, of course, finally get the first confrontation between Spider-Man and the Norman Osborn Red Goblin. Do you have any general thoughts about it before we get into the nitty-gritty of it?
Yeah, I think this is another really strong issue. I don't think it's quite as good as the last one, but I think if we got this issue independent of the previous issue any day of the week, we would have said this is the hottest thing, since sliced bread. Like this is a really good issue preceded by an all-time excellent issue.
Any issues I do have with this comic, I mean, almost in their own weird way kind of have more to do with maybe how some certain ideas were not set up by the previous arcs in this comic. I mean, it's funny, Dan. We kind of got called out on Twitter recently for maybe not being so hopped up on the last, not the Venom Inc. arc, but like that, what is it, Death Omega Red or whatever it was.
Threat Level Red.
Yeah, whatever. That's how memorable it was for me. That we weren't like, all about it, and we kind of felt like that arc was used to kind of rush certain ideas into place, and especially the way 798 ended, which I thought was a pretty interesting beat in its own way. It's like I did have this moment where I was like, oh man, if we were maybe just kind of, if like the issues in between the legacy issue, the initial legacy issues, and then going down swinging, if there was a more coherent bridge that kind of was charting Peter's character arc in a meaningful way, I felt like that last moment would have been even more powerful and poignant. And like in a vacuum, it was a good moment, and this has been a good issue. But it's like it is kind of making me wonder, what was going on the last couple of months? Like if we just had that consistency, I think I would be even more amped up about this storyline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like, really, my disappointment, and I hate that we're starting on this kind of negative, but like my disappointment in this issue is just that I didn't love it more. Like, I really liked it, and I really wanted that final moment to hit, as strong as I think it could have, and it just didn't, as much as I like an all-time moment. Like, already to me, I'm having coming home, flashes for this storyline. Like, I want it to be as good as Coming Home, and I think it really has the chance to be. But the ending of this book, I think it was not what I wanted, but still not bad. Like, in a perfect setup, this would have been one of the most exciting endings to a book I've read in quite some time.
Right.
But do you want to talk about the things we really liked about this issue? Because I think there's a lot to like about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the story has just been really expertly executed when it comes to setting of mood and kind of the ominous undertones of everything going on. I mean, we had that entire last issue of it just was sinister and was, quite frankly, creeped the hell out of me the whole time. And you kind of just felt going into this issue like, oh man, when Osborn shows up, the shoe is about to drop. And how does this book open? But with like this kind of like very serene, happy-go-lucky scene of Peter and the science team at the Bugle. And it's like, oh man, everything's great. Oh God, it's going to go so bad so soon, isn't it? Right, Dan?
Yeah. I've never read like the opening of a book and been like, oh, I feel so bad for these guys because they're about to have the shoe dropped on them. It's very interesting because when I was writing my review for this, I was thinking about the last time I've been this excited about reading a Spider-Man issue, like, was really in the lead up to 700. Like I not knowing where it was going to go and what was going to happen. And the difference between this story and that one is, in that one, the audience wasn't on board, right? We didn't know what was coming for Peter. But here, we know what is coming for Peter. And so the dread, like it's a different kind of dread. It's the audience knowing about the bomb under the table, and it's even my cringe level was up even more.
Yeah, I mean it's where the movie audience, the old cliche, we know the killer's in the closet, so to speak, or is around the corner, or in the basement, or wherever it is, and we know that these people are trapped like rats right now, and yet, like when the goblin does eventually show up, it still feels creepy and powerful, and like even when you know it's coming. I mean, Eminem's rendering of the goblin, Osborn is just the goblin here, I think was, certainly one of the best looking Green Goblins we've seen in recent memory. It's just like kind of like captures that old Romita-esque aesthetic, since we've been talking so much about Romita in recent months.
Yeah, I love it when artists kind of harken back to Romita's Goblin, specifically the eyes, the kind of like bug eyes with the small pupils. I just found the way that Eminem drew him was so creepy, like this kind of like child predator almost. Like he's just kind of soulless and just terrifying. I mean, I just felt icky looking at this guy, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, because on the surface, I mean, the Green Goblin is kind of not an absurd looking character, but I mean, like, it's kind of like, obviously he's Marvel's version of the Joker in many ways. It's kind of like, this is something that could be done wrong, and the potency of it would be missing. But certainly Romita, I think, nailed it. And not that other people have gotten it wrong, but Eminem's really kind of, I mean, because this is a big moment in this story, because Osborn is not supposed to be able to reconnect with the Goblin, which is of course noted in the exposition here. So if you're gonna bring him back as the Goblin, it's got to be done in a very splashy way, and I feel like it's achieved here.
Well, the splash pages help out with that a great deal. I mean, you get two big, beautiful ones of him bursting through the walls into the Daily Bugle, and then, obviously Spider-Man coming back out of the closet to punch him, midair. They're beautiful. I mean, these pages went for sale immediately online, and I was like, well, I don't really have the money for them, but I'm going to look, because it's something every page of this book was beautiful and something a collector would want to own. What did you think about how everybody in the Bugle reacted to this? I mean, you get a nice moment with Robbie, where the Goblin kind of calls him out, like, knowing that he knows, or, as we've always suspected, that Robbie has known who Spider-Man is, or Peter's alternate identity.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, it's funny. I mean, this whole sequence is kind of hearkening back to, I'm thinking back to the night of the Goblin, or whatever, the I guess it was part of the Revelations arc from the 90s. I mean even all the way, even the fact that it takes place in the Bugle. But yeah, it's like this kind of, again, this feeling of dread and unease and unsettledness, and what is he actually going to do here? And him, like, they're trying to stand up to him a little bit, but like no one really knows what he's capable of doing. And then of course, he drops the what he thinks is that they think is the body of Phil Urich, which is just like, I mean, even it's just a very like, whoa. And then it's a bomb, right? I believe that was
it's the tritium, the tritium bomb from the annual. See, that annual is really counting now.
There we go, counting that annual.
I gotta say, like, when I was reading through this at the first time, I didn't love that everybody seemed to be very standard. Like, we do this at the Bugle all the time, like it really, downplays the threat of the Goblin, but it seems almost intentional, because it's setting up how much more of a threat the Goblin is going to become, right? Like,
right.
His old persona had become somewhat routine, even if we haven't seen it in a while. But he's about to become something so much more frightening, pages later in the comic. that bomb you made reference to blows up, taking out the top floor of that Daily Bugle building, and then we get this really cool scene, I thought, of the goblin like impaled in the wreckage. I don't think any of us bought it for a second, but like, what an image, huh?
Yeah. Again, hearkening back to Amazing Spider-Man number 122. I mean, I have a feeling, especially since this is Dan Slott's swan song, we're going to be getting a lot of goblin nostalgia here. I think I used, way back in the day when Goblin Nation was closing out Superior, I did a top 10 Green Goblin Spider-Man story list for Chasing Amazing, and I have a feeling this is probably the story I should have done it for, because I have a feeling most of those moments are going to be called back to throughout this arc.
Yeah, you're right. And then that scene becomes, there's a great moment where the goblin, Peter admits that, he would have saved him if he could have, and the goblin almost mocks him about this. Like, of course you would. That's your weakness, kind of thing. Before transforming into the Red Goblin in a really dramatic way. I loved the art, how the scene itself turns into the Carnage symbiote, and all the color that seems to like becoming that red glow almost comes out of the wreckage. I thought this was beautiful and terrifying.
Definitely. And I mean, what did you think of Peter's or Spider-Man's initial response to seeing Norman as Carnage? Because I mean, like, I thought it was interesting, but like I wasn't totally sold on it, if that makes sense.
I have the opposite opinion of you. Like, I didn't love the reveal. Like, I love the reveal, but I didn't love the ultimate image of the Red Goblin. I'm still not totally sold on that design. The kind of like devil tail and like weird eyebrow eyes of the Carnage symbiote. I just right. It looks a lot like the Sam Raimi Goblin with the kind of coned head and everything. I don't love this design. I know we were talking about how thrilled we were going to be to see Stuart Immonen's ultimate reveal of the Red Goblin, and I gotta say, I was a little underwhelmed by this moment, maybe because we've already seen the character in so much promotional art before, but I thought Spider-Man's reaction, the kind of like expletive reaction, he has to it, was, to me, sold Peter's fear on it. Like Norm, he says, I should make a joke, but then he literally has nothing to say. And I love moments like that in Spider-Man comics where, he's such a motor mouth until he's truly in trouble. He has nothing to say. And it's a great kind of like inversion of how his jokiness works.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess part of me, especially when we got the very next sequence, which was these Carnage Goblin bombs, which were truly a thing of terror. I mean, just a wonderfully maliciously conceived contraption from the mind of Dan Slott and Stuart Immonen here.
I love that they can talk. That's my favorite thing.
And they're like chewing on him. I mean, it's just horrendously horrifying in a wonderful way. But like I apologize if I'm being overly pedantic and kind of not suspending my disbelief or not. But it's like I'm also kind of still looking at this in a way where I'm like, well, Peter, over the course of his life as Spider-Man, he has defeated the Goblin, he's defeated Carnage, and yes, they're together here, but he's also dealt with Carnage symbiote taking over random people. Like I think the dread that kind of got brought in initially before Osborn even truly revealed his hand of what he's capable of doing, I didn't quite buy it right away. But then within minutes, I started buying it. But I almost wish we kind of saw, I almost would have liked to see Peter run his mouth and get dropped as quickly as he did to really sell the, oh crap. Like, I can't, like, this is real, like like it really would have juxtaposed, like that using the talk to kind of like, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but I still need to kind of like, it's a defense mechanism. And then it just stuns him into silence instead of being stunned into silence just by the sight of something. It's like he still doesn't know what's going on in my mind. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I totally get that. That's really interesting, and you're right. That probably would have worked very well in the comic. It worked for me, but I think your version probably maybe would have hit a little bit harder. Um,
It's just, I mean, I'm not trying to rewrite the book here.
no,
It's just a
no.
little nitpick, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my nitpicks come in the next scene, which I thought was beautifully rendered. You know, this kind of silhouette. You know, Spider-Man crashes into this building, and the Goblin kind of taunts him from afar through his spider tracer. And I loved all of that, but the ultimate request from the Goblin felt a little false to me, especially given the previous issue. You know, you talked about Spider-Man kind of realizing his defeat, a little too late. But I thought for sure with Green Goblin finally having so much of an upper hand, right? Like Spider-Man doesn't even realize that Norman now knows his identity, is the Carnage, is keeping tabs on all of these people, has Jonah tied up. It seemed like an opportunity for him to really make a decisive strike at Spider-Man's heart in a meaningful way. And, here he kind of just shows up at the Daily Bugle, makes a threat, blows up a building, but is ultimately kind of toying with Spider-Man instead of attacking. And to me, I guess the Goblin has kind of always toyed with Spider-Man. But his ultimate statement here is that he wants Peter to give up being Spider-Man because he's always cared about the persona more than the man inside. And I think it's an interesting comment on Dan Slott's run, which has all been about the man inside the costume being significant. But I don't know if that's true to the Goblin. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I think, I mean, to me, Green Goblin and Spider-Man, I mean, this is a blood feud, like, and I don't think generally in blood feuds that there are caveats and qualifications. I mean, this is pure hatred, and it's like, you refer to Coming Home earlier, and what I found so effective about Moreland and Coming Home was this idea, like he wasn't toying with Spider-Man. He was just like, look, I'm going to get you to come out one way or another, and when you do, I'm going to destroy you. And this is and like that was terrifying because it's like, what is Spider-Man really going to do?
And it was impersonal, right? Like he says, it's nothing about you. I just do this,
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas here, it's like you have someone who is literally, he's gone to Tibetan monks to try and vanquish this man and has, bonded with the symbiote, has been consistently shown over the last couple of years. I mean, not to mention the entire history of the character, but, has been consistently shown in the last few years of just being utterly obsessed with it's not about defeating Spider-Man for power or money. He wants him dead, like you have ruined everything from me and I need you dead. And to have Spider-Man on the ropes like that and this to be like, well, okay, here's the deal.
Yeah, I thought, again, we talked about at the beginning of this review, a beautiful moment of Peter, saying, I'm going to burn my costume, and, Spider-Man may be out of the fight, but Peter Parker has always been more essential to it, and I'm going to come at you as a man, not a Spider-Man. Like, great moment, but maybe the wrong villain for that beat.
Yeah, or if not the wrong villain, I like, and this is also like where I said like what I was talking about in the beginning about the setup to this story. Like, I felt like we were building to this moment well during those three, Paula Parker storylines, in terms of, kind of like Spider or the Man, which is like a very common theme in the world of Spider-Man comics, especially in the Dan Slott run. But then we got so far away from, I think, that struggle, like we had Venom Inc., which was just a total diversion that could have been
written and published, I feel like, at almost any point in Spider-Man history. It was just kind of evergreen in that way. And that kind of derailed the momentum of what I think was being built towards there. And then these last other stories, I mean, you know, it was more about like tying up all the loose ends in terms of relationships, but nothing so much about like, you know, Peter having to kind of face his own failings again and you know what Spider-Man has to do with that, you know, like those are always to me the most effective stories that look at Peter, is when he's coping with what doing Spider-Man means for him in his life and what he can and can't do because of that. And when you get an ending like this, which is, like you said, like this kind of call out to, I'm going to come at you as a man. I mean, like, how much more effective would it have been if they just kind of kept building on that momentum from those Fall of Parker stories, right? I mean, it feels like that's where they were going. That's obviously why they were being written, to build to this. But the thread got lost along the way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I'm still invested, though. Like, I'm still hugely invested in this story. And I think in large part because of some of the subplots we got in here. I can't wait to see what happens with Jonah Jameson, because you know, he has this moment where he gets his own floating heads of guilt,
Yep.
you know, for once. And I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Jonah feel this guilty about outing Spider-Man to Norman. And I know we've seen Jonah in preview cover artwork for you know, the new Spider-Man run, but we also learned that Spider-Man's going to be wearing a black suit in that run. So in my mind, that artwork is a total lie. So we can't trust any of that.
Right.
So, you know, I'm really worried about Jonah. I mean, like, this is an opportunity for him to make up for his, you know, misdeeds, but he's totally outclassed here. And, you know, I guess he's got Agent Venom helping him out, but, or I guess Agent Anti-Venom. I'm excited to see what this character does. I think it's a big opportunity for him to kind of make up for all the things in his life for the past several decades. And, you know, also the stuff with the Lyman family. I really have no clue where that's going. And I'm very curious.
And we haven't really had a good Harry Norman showdown in really long time, right? I'm trying to think now.
Yeah, maybe American Son?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so I mean that's all queued up to be really interesting, and it, you know, I'm seeing preview artwork coming out of issue 800, and it's like I don't even know how we're going to get to some of the points they've shown. It is bizarre looking. So I think we're on for a wild ride, and this is just the start of it. I wish this ending had stuck a little bit stronger, but you know, it's a minor blip in something I think otherwise really strong.
Well, I think it is. I think it is a good ending. It's just like I think getting to that point was a little incorrect, not incorrectly mapped, but the map to that point wasn't the best drawn map.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have anything else to say about this issue? I mean, the art, like we said, is stunning. Just stunning.
Yeah, I got nothing too specific to add. I mean, I'm assuming we're going to probably get MJ back into this at some point, or Aunt May. I mean, this is we're still in a pretty harrowing place, which is what I want from this story. I don't want to be able to figure out how we're going to get to where we ultimately get to. So
yeah, for my money, it's like I have no idea where we're going. Me speculating is not doing anything, even if I do want to speculate about Mephisto. And you know, I do want to say there is a line in this comic where Norman says, you know, you made a devil's bargain.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, why keep? I mean, it's bolded. There's no way it's by accident. Like
they are just poking you with a stick, Dan.
I understand that. And then they released artwork from, you know, the first issue of you know, the new Nick Spencer run, and it's explicitly a to have and to hold reference with Peter in a black suit with MJ on top of the Empire State Building, and it's like, I mean, how many more clues could they put into this? Unless they're trolling us in a huge way. Like, I expect we're going in a really weird direction otherwise.
It's all going to take place in a snow globe at the end, Dan. That's it.
I don't know where we're going, but like I put my foot down here. I did a whole big tweet about it to Nick Lowe saying, "Why do you torture me so?" But I just wanted to get it recorded on the podcast. There's weird stuff going on here.
Peter is going to wake up in bed with MJ next to him in issue 801, and it's going to be like before Amazing Spider-Man 545 ever happened.
You don't think they'll do the
You won't believe the dream I just had, MJ. Face it, Tiger. You need to find a new storyline.
You don't think they'll make a reference to the first issue of Brand New Day with him kissing MJ at the beginning in that big splashy page?
Anyway, so want to grade this thing?
Yeah, I'm giving it an A-.
I'm a notch below you. I'm going to say B+ on this.
Okay, great. I can't wait for the next one, which I'm hoping won't take as long of a break between books as this one did.
Yeah, this was a solid month. I mean, come on.
I feel like they heat us up, and then they're just like, time to cool down.
Right. Well, they say, what, May 30th is ASM 800? Is that the official release date on it, I believe?
I think so.
So, I don't know. You do the math.
I'm not being paid to do that math, but I can't wait. This is really exciting stuff.
Well, Dan, that was another fun comic to discuss. But the next one, well, this might be one of our more contentious discussions in recent memory, I think.
Yeah. We have pretty different opinions on this one that I think will be fun to see play out when issue 800 comes out in a few weeks. Is it still a few weeks away, Mark?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, boy. Well, of course, if you want to join us for that conversation, as it happens, you'll need to be part of our Patreon club.
Well, let's get to that discussion, Dan.
What's new?
So, Dan, I feel like, we're being very kind and loving to each other to start, but we might have some disagreements in this episode. This seems like we're poised to have a meeting of the minds that may not meet in the most pleasant of ways here.
This is our review of Amazing Spider-Man 799, but it might as well be, I think, it's going to be what I think is going to be a flipped version of our review of Superior Spider-Man number 30.
Yeah, it's true. It's if to go back in time, that was an issue where I kind of was like, there were some things in it, I think, at the time that concerned me, but for the most part, I was kind of all in on the story and really like grooving on it and trusted Dan Slott to deliver a good final chapter in Superior 31. So I was like, yeah, let's just see where it goes. And Dan was just kind of like, no, don't you see all these problematic things? I was like, yeah, let's just see where it goes. I'm sure it's going to be great.
And then, Mark, was it great?
No, it wasn't great. And that was kind of the first of the true disappointments that we got from this creator here who's wrapping up his run on Amazing Spider-Man. And, but it's like one of those funny things where, like, I don't think we truly disagreed as much as we thought or even sounded like we did, because I did acknowledge the problems, but I felt like I just had a more open mind to it. And I think, as you noted, for $7.99, it's kind of the inverse, where I'm just like ready to pick this thing apart. And I think you're kind of like, it sounds like you're more like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but let's just see where it goes.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And I just genuinely think I like this issue more than you do. But I also acknowledge that there are some things in terms of overall storytelling that are bothering me. And I think you want to just talk about the big thing in this issue is that, like, it kind of drops the ball on an already problematic ending to the previous issue.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a bit about kind of the well, now Peter's here to kind of shoulder the load and do what Spider-Man can't, which was the ending of 798, to take out Norman and the Red Goblin, and even with that kind of being problematic in its own right, as we discussed at length in our last Patreon episode, it still felt for the most part like we were going to get this very personal mano a mano kind of story. This was Peter versus Norman. Norman had had the upper hand, had everything working in his favor. What was Peter going to do? And I personally was like, all right, what are we going to do here? What is Slott going to do here to show? And he did pretty much. He being Slott kind of introduced this idea that was the polar opposite of where I thought the story was going. I feel like it was a swerve for the sake of the swerve. I mean, instead of keeping this very isolated kind of personal story, to keep using that word. It's Peter being, as I joked, it's Peter playing Spider Oracle, aka Barbara Gordon's character, when she was in her wheelchair during the Batman books, where she's just kind of like using computers and technology to put all the other birds of prey pieces into place to help fight the bad guys. In this case, the birds of prey are Miles and Silk and Clayton Clash Coles, and I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Like, what happened to this was going to be Peter figuring this out for himself? This doesn't seem like Peter figuring this out for himself at all.
And I agree with that to a point. I mean, I think I would reframe this as like Peter even trying to figure it out more than Peter is going, the first thing I need to do before I even attempt to go after the Goblin is make sure my friends and family are safe, right? So he calls up everybody. I don't really see this as a Spider Oracle thing. I mean, yes, he's operating in everybody's ears, but only because he's under the pressure to have to find some solution to keep everybody safe. And that makes sense to me, rather than kind of going straight into a fight with the Goblin, that he is being cautious about how he handles it because he's been given a moment, respite to kind of figure out what he's going to do. I guess my problem with it is I just feel like that was the mistake, is that this story shouldn't have given Peter a break. These stories work great because Peter's under the gun and he doesn't know what the Goblin's going to do next in attacking him, and that was the whole appeal of 797, is the Goblin knows everything, Peter doesn't, he's screwed. This book opens with 6 pages with no Red Goblin. And to me, that's the problem. I think Peter's actions make sense and all of the following things make sense. It's just like, way to take your foot off the gas.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a huge tonal shift from what we got even the 2 issues. I mean, this very ominous, harrowing tone kind of goes out the window for all this setup and all this kind of red leader, gold leader stuff. I mean, Dan, again, I'm not trying to be overly glib and to poke holes and stuff, but the first thing I kind of thought about when we're going through this was I felt like Norman made things pretty clear last issue. It's like, you're out of the hero business, dude. Get the hell out of here. Or I'm going to kill you and everyone you love. And I don't know. I kind of found this to be very risky that Peter would have Miles in costume and Silk in costume checking on his family and stuff like that. What if Norman sees another Spider-Man? He's going to be like, you're going against our deal, dude. I'm going to kill them all now. I mean, it just seemed so strange. This should have been Peter by himself, nobody else, because he has to figure this out for himself, and that's not what we got at all. I
feel that. I think it is silly that they are in costume outside of the apartment. I mean, there's probably a shorthand for hey, if you don't know this character, it is a Spider-Man character, not just some random young kid that's hanging out with Aunt May. Although What Miles is going to do to the Red Goblin is completely beyond me. I guess his Venom Sting is pretty powerful, but either way, if Peter can't stand up to this guy, I hardly think Miles would be able to. That's not dissing Miles. He's a totally fine character, but
Well, even the Venom sting gets exposed here. It's like it finally doesn't work.
Thank God, too. I mean,
Right.
I am done with that Venom sting.
I mean, thank God Bendis went to DC, so they finally locked him in a closet. He couldn't make Venom sting overcome everything.
That's the one major benefit. If we're gonna take a trophy away from that, it's the Venom sting has been depowered.
There you go. But
I did want to say something about this scene. A little detail. There is a character that we've been made to think is Norman Osborn in a green trench coat that's looking over both Peter when he was with Mary Jane in 797, and now in this one, Miles and Aunt May. And this character, in that one, I think in 797 says something like, "Oh, so that's how it is," or something like that, or "How interesting," and you're made to think it's Norman. And I didn't think it was anybody but Norman until reading this issue. I suspect that it's Gwen Stacy, or the clone of Gwen Stacy, because Norman is wearing a similar outfit, but their colorist chose a blue color for the very small time we see Norman in that trench coat in this issue. I have to think that's the classic Gwen green trench coat, and she's due for a reappearance in 800. Was that how you read it, or?
I did not read it that way, but I don't disagree with you. But I know you've also kind of been beating the drum of Gwen's clone showing up again, and I would certainly think the way the story kind of twists and turns in this issue, that's not outside the realm of possibility, because it definitely seems like Dan Slott, in some cases, for better or for worse, is going to cap off every single storyline he's ever done on Amazing Spider-Man within this arc.
Yeah, and it seems like if this is going to be the final Norman Osborn story, which I think there's a good chance it could be. I mean, at least for now, every final Norman Osborn story is. If you're going to kill off Norman Osborn, you have someone like Gwen do it. Right? Or you at least make reference to that and have all these people he's bereaved, finally get their comeuppance against this guy. I don't know. That's how I would do it. It seems like the path that we're headed on to me.
Yeah. So then another thing that we kind of get in the early goings on this issue is this scene between Jonah and Peter, where Jonah basically admits that Norman found out because he blabbed it out, and Peter kind of coldly hangs up on him. And I didn't dislike the scene per se, but I feel like it needed more, and especially in light of some of the stuff we got, I feel, instead of this later on in this issue, that kind of plays into the pacing. I don't know. I get the sense, Dan, that you kind of like the succinctness of this, but I felt like, I don't know, there was something missing from this. It could have used actually a little more exposition, and maybe we could have had a little less Osborn-Lyman family drama later on. What are your thoughts?
It seemed natural to me. I mean, if I had found out that everyone in my life, was being threatened by someone because of someone that I outed myself to and trusted in, disappointing me, I would probably hang up the phone. To me, it's a cold moment, and one that further sets JJJ up to do something drastic to kind of make it right. Like a conversation would have let him off the hook, and here Peter doesn't allow him any sympathy.
I don't even know if it needed a conversation, but I would have liked to see more from Peter even after the hang-up happened. You know what I mean? I feel like we get this beat, and it's an important beat, and for the most part it makes sense, but then it just gets dropped in favor of sillier stuff and new plot points. This revelation, we still have not properly dealt with this revelation that Peter made in Spectacular to Jonah.
Oh,
you know what I mean? It's like this was total. It was totally done to set up this storyline the way they did, but it's still, the true gravity of what happened here is I just feel like at every opportunity is getting dropped. No one actually, you know what I mean? Like, it's like like something along the lines of just Peter being like, I cannot believe in this moment of weakness. Here I go again, being weak and seeing the best out of people, and this is what I get for it. You know what I mean? Like, this is a total tragedy, and instead it's kind of like, treated as more like, wow, this guy really did something bad to me. I'm just going to hang up the phone on him. I mean, like I said, this is tragedy. It's not just like, oh, whoops, I'm ticked off now. Like, this is next level. And it speaks to the larger issue of the fact that no one, it seems, in the Spider book universe, including in the Chip Zdarsky book, really wants to deal with what they did. And what that means.
Yeah. I mean,
and why they did it.
I get the sense that Dan Slott doesn't want to wade into it too much, even though he's kind of, he saw it as an opportunity, I think, to kind of, have this big character beat for Jonah in this book. But I get the sense that even he, from the way it's written, that he feels a little uncomfortable about this kind of change for the character. Although I don't know. I think it's really that editorial, did not properly plan out the kind of fallout of that revelation. You've got a couple issues in Spectacular about it, but they didn't really flesh out people's emotions very well in that book. And
no,
yeah, I mean, but to me, and then maybe it comes down to how you feel about hanging up the phone on someone. Like, to me, I would never do that, and it seemed like a big moment for me, for Peter. Like, I didn't need to spend more time with him. Like, that was a statement enough. Like, I got it. Like, I know exactly how he's feeling by that action, and you get that kind of frozen face on the screen, on the FaceTime screen of Peter looking upset. And to me, that said all I needed to know about how Peter is responding to this, but I can also understand that maybe you'd want more time to deal with that.
Yeah. So,
I was just eager to get to the Red Goblin, to be honest.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we get this really interesting fight sequence rendered out. Well, actually, no. Before we get to the fight, we get, and again, this was another one of my problems with this comic. I feel like, obviously when it comes to Norman and the Goblin, like the Osborn family drama always plays into it. But we're now in what's essentially the penultimate chapter of this storyline, and at this point now we're getting more new characters and exposition and revelations. This time we got Emma is actually Emily Lyman Osborn, aka Norman's wife or ex or whatever you want to call her, and we can speculate on who she actually is, but the fact of the matter is it's like we're introducing new information here at a point where we need to actually start, I feel like, resolving information, not bringing new stuff into this. I know we're going to have this gigantic issue 800, but I just feel like bringing this character into this and her circumstances just adds so much logistical problems to this storyline, and I just did not like this revelation at all, Dan. I don't know if there's a way for me to see the silver lining here.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where this is going, but it seems like the one thing that's truly not necessary for this comic, I'm guessing she's a clone that Ben Reilly was trying to use to gain leverage on Norman, in the same way he did with Kingpin. It's something it's totally unnecessary. I'm curious to see if it does fall in line, but I'm with you. It seems like a step too far, in terms of keeping this thing tight and closed up. Especially since this character is not really one we've ever spent time with in the pages of Spider-Man. To the point that you and I never even made the connection of guessing it, to the point that Harry Osborn can't even recognize his mother. So, Yeah, I don't really know what this is all about. I'm guessing we'll find out in 800. But yeah, it'll probably be something that'll take a page or two to explain, have very little dramatic payoff. And yeah, I don't know. It is weird. I'm curious if she works for someone else, right? Because she was tasked with collecting vials of blood from the kids. So maybe she wants to clone them if they die. I don't know. It is a very strange addition because it begs like answering 20 pages of comic worth. Where did this character come from?
And I certainly at this stage of the game don't want to spend those 20 pages, and yet at the same token, it's like you're not doing the whole reveal justice without explaining it. So I feel like you got Slots painted into a corner here. And it's an unnecessary corner to be painted into because we didn't need this. Like there's so much other story that can be served instead of this one right now. Like we could be doing stuff with Harry, we could be doing stuff with Jonah, we can be doing stuff with Peter, with Aunt May, and instead we're getting this like soap opera level stuff and probably like you mentioned clones, which I don't know who's clamoring for more clones, but I guess we are.
I'm still on wait and see about this, but I guess I'm curious about your feeling about this because so much of this book seemed to be Osborn versus Parker kind of story, and now we're getting the Osborns becoming a really big part of this story. I've seen some people writing online, and I don't know if this is your opinion, that it really went from a smaller Parker versus Osborn thing to including this whole Osborn family and legacy thing. I don't think it was handled the best way, but I do think that most of these Goblin stories do end up kind of being like a bit of a three-way fight where the Osborn family and Norman and Spider-Man are kind of key parts of all of it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but no, I just feel like the thread of this storyline and what was making it so compelling is just getting lost here. I mean, I know it's not fair to compare this story to some of the great Spider-Man, Green Goblin stories of yesteryear, but the fact of the matter is what makes those effective is that these are mortal enemies fighting each other. It is a blood feud in the most literal sense. And it doesn't need these ancillary theatrics. It's just raw hate and violence, which I think is effective in superhero comics sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And we're setting that up here. And yeah, now it's just, I mean, if you want to do a Osborn family squabble story, then that should have been set up 3 issues ago. I feel we're too late in the game to be bringing all this other stuff into it. You spent a bunch of preamble issues and then the last 2 issues really honing in on, setting this up as another blood feud. And instead now it's just another, story with a lot of disparate points and a lot of different characters to service, and I feel like when as precedent has shown with this current creator, that when there's too many things to serve, nobody gets served, and I'm just concerned that that's where we're at right now. 100 issues ago, it was very clear that this was going to be Spider-Man versus Doc Ock, and probably the least elegantly composed sections of those storylines was when we were bringing in people like Mary Jane and characters that weren't Spider-Man and Doc Ock. And now I feel like we just got a whole lot of different things going on between that aren't just Peter and Norman, and it's disappointing to me. I feel like this is an opportunity lost.
And I for me, it all hangs on 800. If he's able to merge the Osborn story and the Parker story together in a satisfying way, this will have been worth it to me. Mainly because he's executing on things that I feel like people have been playing around with for years and never moved forward on. Like, I thought it was brilliant that Normie got the Carnage symbiote. I mean, I don't know how that works, but we've always had Normie lurking in the background, saying these kind of things about and tearing off dolls off, heads off the dolls of Spider-Man toys, and to finally find a way to give Normie some kind of danger without aging him up, I find really interesting. There's a lot of little pieces I find interesting that, you're right, might not hang well together. If he pulls it off in 800, I'll be really thrilled by that. But yeah, it is concerning, even though I like the individual elements that I'm seeing in this comic for the large part. Like, I'm curious about, Grandma Osborn. Do I think it's going to get paid off? I'm anxious about it. But it's interesting to me. So it's hard for me to fault this issue, because I think like 699, which you just referenced, was a bit of a placeholder. Like, it moved the pieces forward a little bit, but it was really still waiting for 700 to, throw all the punches. It was both teams getting into their places. It was eliminating everybody else so it could just be them. And I feel like at the end of this, I don't have to like think in my brain like, well, what about Silk and Miles and all these other characters? They've been benched, so like they're cleaned up. But then you're right, it introduces this whole other thing to further complicate it. So it's like It's a bit of both. It's got a foot in both worlds.
And even in the benching, I know what you're saying about that, and I did find the fight between Norman or Red Goblin and all of like Peter's helpers to be very effective and beautifully rendered too by Immonen, for that matter. Especially like the Torch and Clash stuff, I thought was great visually and narratively. Like, it was effective, and it kind of did some explanation. It provided some exposition in a very dynamic, action heavy way about Norman's new power set and stuff like that. But all the same, like, oh man, the resolution. And granted, this may not be the actual resolution, but the implied resolution to this whole thing it just had me tearing my hair out, Dan.
Which one?
The Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom has become Dan Slott's cop-out and, like, magic trick for everything, it seems like, the last couple of years. And it's like, yes, it was very poignant when Flash is kind of, like, willing what's left of it to Peter, like, oh, you're to Spider-Man, you're our number one player, go get him, champ. But it's like, it's such a bailout to Spider. I mean, like, Peter is on his last leg here, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, and here is this magic unexplained thing that was created during New Ways to Die that Dan Slott just loves to bring back as like a cure-all for everything. I mean, we saw it in Spider Island. We saw it in Venom Inc. We just see this thing over and over again as kind of the way to fix things, and I'm tired of it. Like, let's find a new trick, man. And it's like, it seems like such a waste that this is Peter is getting bailed out. He's not doing this on his own. He's getting bailed out, and that's again, it's disappointing. It's opportunity lost, in my opinion.
I can see that, but I'm also gonna say the other way around, that I felt this moment. We clearly had a moment in the previous issue where the Goblin mocked Peter for wanting to save him, and that would be his downfall. And here we see Flash, whose hero is Spider-Man, who is very clearly styled himself after as hero. Doing what Spider-Man would do. You know what I mean? Like, saving others at the sake of his own existence. And I thought, for what seems to be the end of that character, like, I think this is probably the end of Anti-Venom. He was killed in this moment. I found that like a fitting end for that, and a fitting end for Flash as a superpowered character. If that's, at least that was my takeaway, is that this is Flash's last stand as a super character. And
I guess. I don't know. All I know is, when Spider-Man was
lifting tons of steel over his head, it wasn't because Anti-Venom came and gave him the power to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, the stuff that stays with me more is Peter overcoming these odds because of his sheer force of will and his spirit, that cannot be conquered, not, magic voodoo that really has never been explained in terms of how it works, giving him a leg up, literally.
And we're talking about the leg injury. I mean, like,
yes,
yeah. So, like, if I've seen the artwork from 800, which shows Peter wearing a symbiote of some kind, and I'm going to forget that I know that because, I don't think that should matter, and I don't really know what that is because to me it seems like he didn't get the power of Anti-Venom, and I could certainly be wrong about that, in which case I will relent and be like, that's dumb, unless it's really sold to me in 800.
I mean, that would be really, really dumb, and I'm hopeful that it's not that. But like I said, I still find this to be a bailout, and it's like, like there's got to be a more creative way to get Peter to Norman in a way that's meaningful, that's not getting bailed out by some other character that, in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. That's where I stand on it, Dan. I mean,
and I see it as like one of Peter's longtime supporters finally giving him the support that he needs and saying, like, go get back in the fight and be better than all the rest of us, and like, to me, that was meaningful. Like, these guys all sacrificed, and it, didn't really work out, but they can do something to help out Peter. And it wasn't like a cheapy, like, oh, this is Silk, beating these villains for you, like we've seen before during much of Volume 3. This was literally, we're going to give you a helping hand, and now it's your chance to go be the best of us. And 800 could totally prove me wrong, but for now, that seemed like a decent setup to me. But I look, this could very well be, like I said, Superior 31 all over again, where it's taken my good faith and flipped it. But
I would say the difference here is there's he's got 96 pages to fix it.
yeah, which is considerably more than 31.
Yeah. So, Dan, I was pretty let down by this. Do you want to get to grades?
Yeah, I'm giving this one a B-.
All right, I'm giving it a C-. So, like I said, there's room to improve, but I am highly concerned about what we're going to be expositing about in issue 800. Highly concerned. So,
and I'm super excited. So,
all right, well, there you go.
We'll see.
Well, thanks again for joining us for this special episode of our show, which wouldn't be possible without all of our wonderful Patreon subscribers who keep us going and our show on the air. For our Patreon subscribers, be sure to check out our Patreon page and your podcast feed for a special review of the Free Comic Book Day Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer and Ryan Otley as we kick off this new run of the title. There's no better place to follow along with that new run than here on Patreon. We'll also have a review of issue 800 and Avengers Infinity War over the next couple of weeks, so you won't want to miss either of those. Remember, for just $3.99 a month, the price of one new comic, you get access to our exclusive new issue reviews, Swarm B-Book reviews, extended interviews and outtakes, mailbags, and much, much more. And for $10 or more a month, you'll gain access to our amazing commissions, including our upcoming commission from none other than Spider-Man artist Alex Saviuk.
As for our regular show, we plan on returning sometime in the next week with our regularly scheduled podcast covering the Spectacular Spider-Man magazine. But as it's the end of the school year for me, I know that my schedule's a bit up in the air, so keep your eye on our Twitter feed to get all the details on our next show, and thanks again for the patience. It's just that time of year. And we'll get it to you, we promise. That next episode is coming. But in the meantime, I will say, be sure to check out some of our other shows like the ultimate spin as they just wrapped up Bendis' run with Miles Morales, and they got the upcoming end of Spider-Gwen, and I was there to talk with them about the Bendis conclusion on their latest episode. And we've also got our newest podcast, The Untold Talks of Spider-Man, where they recently discussed Amazing Spider-Man number 505 by JMS and JRJR. But Mark, I hear that you're on an upcoming episode of the show.
Spoiler alert, Dan. But no, yeah, go check it out. In probably another week or so, I'm going to be on Untold Talks of Spider-Man, hanging out with Kane and Matt, talking Amazing Spider-Man number 430 and 431, the Carnage Cosmic Saga. Apparently, Dan, while they were researching the issue, they stumbled upon a Chasing Amazing post I made about this book years ago, where I basically said I found it in a dollar bin, even though it's like a $30 comic on eBay. And they were like, wow, that was like the only research we found on this comic. I'm like, that says something about this story, I think.
So would you say it's a must tune in?
Absolutely, because anytime you get to hear me talk Spider-Man or you talk Spider-Man, Dan, it's must tune in.
So now we'll have like the two articles cornered on the market for these issues.
Got it.
Yeah, well, plus we've also got the amazing Spider Slack community for you to join. So just check out this episode's description for a link to join our Spider-Man Talkin' community. We're talking everything you could possibly think Spider-Man over there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, Dan, I got a little quiet recently just because, I was a little behind in my new issues in Infinity War, but I actually joined in on the Slack recently. So you got me, Dan.
All right. Well, where else can we find you on the internet?
Well, of course, you can find me on Twitter at ChasingASMblog. You can still get my book, 100 Things Spider-Man Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. And actually, I'm going to be, probably by the time you guys listen to this, I'm going to be appearing on another podcast, not Untold Talks. This one's called A Very Special Episode, where actually the topic of the podcast is usually talking about like special episodes of sitcoms and TV shows. But the guys who run that podcast are a bunch of comic book fans, and they're familiar with us, Dan, and what we do. So they had me on to talk Infinity War. So you'll hear initial Infinity War thoughts from me there. But don't worry, Dan, I saved the best stuff for you. How
dare you, Mark? Cheat on me.
Exactly. Well, they pretty much had me on to be like, so what'd you think of Spider-Man in that? And I was like, oh.
All right. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. And what about you, Dan? Where can we find you?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be on the Twitter like normal. That's me at Sup Spider Talk, or my personal account at Dan Gavosden. Lots of things going on. One thing I did want to re-mention is that I am writing a graphic novel that's moving forward, and we have a Facebook page. Look up Entropy Comic. Entropy as in like the cold death of the universe entropy. As a comic. So check it out. We got some artwork up on there now, but we're finishing scripts and moving into the art phase. So there's going to be a ton of awesome new announcements coming on that Facebook page. So I encourage you to go check it out there. In the meantime, though, before Entropy, claims us all as the inevitable heat death of the universe, it is good to keep some kind of morality in check. And that's why we rely on Mark, you, and all of your famous sayings that close out the show. So what are we in tune for this week?
Well, I think the most famous saying of all is, with great podcasts must also come the all-new Amazing Spider Talk.